It's 9:43 at night. You're sitting on the couch, the TV's running in the background, your phone is in your hand, and somehow you spent the last hour watching a video that you don't even care about anymore. Not because you're deeply interested in them, and not because they're going to change your life, but because your brain, it needs somewhere to go after the kind of day you just had. And this is the easiest place to land, but the strange part is, it wasn't in the plan. Driving home from work earlier, you had every intention of being productive tonight. Maybe tonight was going to be that night you got back in the gym. Maybe you were finally going to clean up the garage that you've been walking past for the last month. Or maybe you were finally going to look at your finances instead of avoiding them like you do every week. Maybe you were going to finally start working on that business that you're always thinking about on your lunch break. Whatever your thing is, tonight was supposed to be different. The plan sounded simple in your head. Go home, eat dinner, sit down for a minute, and then get after it. But somewhere between sitting down and opening your phone, 3 hours just disappeared. And now it's late, and tomorrow comes early. And deep down, you are already telling yourself the same thing you've told yourself 100 different times. I'll do it tomorrow. But the scary part, it isn't the procrastination anymore. The scary part is, you've already started losing confidence in your own word. Because there was a time in your life when you told yourself that you were going to do something, you believed in yourself. Now, every promise feels negotiable before you even make it. And if you've ever sat there quietly at night, wondering how your life got this stuck, I don't think your problem is what you think it is. Because most people think being stuck is a motivation problem, or a discipline problem, or a laziness problem. But I don't think that's the truth. I think it's something much deeper that's happening underneath the surface. And once you understand what it is, your life just starts making more sense. Let's say that you decide to finally get in shape. Not talking about it, not researching it, but actually doing it. So you start waking up earlier. You start hitting the gym after work. You start paying attention to what you're eating instead of grabbing whatever's convenient just because you're tired. The first week goes by, and then the second, and then something happens. The scale starts moving. You have more energy. Your clothes, they start fitting different. Somebody at your job notices, and they ask you, have you been losing weight? And for the first time in a long time, you feel proud of yourself. Not just because of the physical progress, but because you're finally becoming somebody who does what he says he's going to do. And that feeling, it matters more than most people realize, because self-confidence, it's not built from watching motivational videos or just positive thinking. It's built through evidence. Every time that you follow through on something difficult, your brain logs it. It starts to build a case that you can trust yourself. So you start thinking, maybe this time is actually different. And then life happens. Your job gets crazy. You're forced to do overtime. One of your kids gets sick. You miss a workout. And then another one and another one. And eventually, the whole routine falls apart. Now here's what most people get wrong. The damage doesn't happen when the routine breaks. Missing a workout is just a setback. Eating bad for a weekend is just a setback. Having a rough week is just a setback. Setbacks are manageable. Your brain, it can file a setback and move on. But the real damage happens afterwards, during the conversation that you have with yourself about it. That's the part that nobody talks about. It's you staring at the ceiling at midnight thinking, here we go again. I knew this wouldn't last. What's wrong with me? But that internal conversation is where the real problem begins. Because your brain, it stops processing that setback and starts to build an identity. And an identity is far more important than a single failure. When setbacks start happening repeatedly, your brain, it stops viewing them as isolated events, and it starts connecting them to a pattern. And patterns become your story. And eventually, that story starts to sound like maybe I'm not the kind of person that follows through. And the difference between failure and shame, failure is an event, but shame is when your brain turns an event into a conclusion about who you are. And once that conclusion is reached, your brain, it will start to protect you from future disappointment before it even begins. It remembers all those times that you got excited about changing your life, but it also remembers the crash that happens afterwards. So now, before you even start, the resistance is already there. And that resistance, it isn't logical, it's emotional. It's your brain running a pattern that has been trained on, trying to protect you from the crash before you even get off the ground. That's why being stuck becomes so confusing, because on the outside, it just looks like you're lazy. But underneath the surface, it's just damaged self-trust. It's now 11:17 at night, and you're still sitting on the couch, and that thing that you said you were going to work on, it never happened. And here's where the negotiations start. It's too late. I needed a break. I had a long day. I'll just start tomorrow. And what makes this so dangerous is that every excuse, it sounds reasonable, but that's not by accident. So your brain is really good at making avoidance feel logical when your brain is exhausted. From the outside, it just looks like procrastination, but on the inside, it feels like common sense. But that's why people stay stuck for so many years without ever realizing what's happening. But here's where that shift gets deeper over time. In the beginning, you still feel the tension. You can feel the gap between the life that you want and the life that you're actually living. And that gap, it bothers you. But after enough years of the same repeated cycle, that tension starts to get quieter. But it's not because things improved. Because your expectations, they got a little bit lower. But that quiet acceptance is far more dangerous than guilt. Because guilt at least means you still believe the change is possible. But quiet acceptance is when your brain turns it into your story. That's when the future stops feeling like it belongs to you. Now imagine that you're sitting in your truck on your lunch break. Your engine's off and you got 10 minutes until you got to be back inside. Your half-eaten lunch is sitting in your passenger seat. A video pops up about a person that's building that business or transforming their body or just changing their life. 5 years ago, you would have watched the whole video. You would have gotten fired up. You would have started imagining what was possible for your own life. But now, you scroll right past it. But not because you hate the message and not because you don't want better for yourself, but because your brain, it has learned something through years of repetition. Getting excited hurts when nothing changes afterwards. Every time that you got your hopes up and then you fell off afterwards, there's a cost. The disappointment, the shame, that quiet confirmation that maybe you're not who you thought you were. So eventually, your brain adapts. It made a trade. It decided that staying numb feels safer than risking that emotional crash again. That's why your brain eventually stops protecting you from failure and starts protecting you from hope, because hope creates an emotional risk. If you get excited again and then you fail again, now you got to feel all that disappointment all over again. So your brain chooses to be numb instead. It chooses scrolling over trying and distractions over effort. Not because they're more fulfilling, but because they're emotionally safe. That's not laziness, that's self-protection. It's one of the clearest signs that your self-trust has been deeply damaged. Your future starts to feel unavailable. Not impossible, just unavailable. Like transformation is just something that happens to other people and not you. And most men, they never say it out loud. They just go to work every day. They still handle their responsibilities, still joke with their co-workers. On the surface, they act like everything is fine. Meanwhile, there's a different conversation that they're having in their head that nobody ever gets to hear. And after enough years, living in survival mode, it becomes your default setting. You wake up tired, you go to work, you handle whatever the day throws at you. You come home and you're mentally exhausted, so you scroll on your phone so you can decompress. You fall asleep, and then you repeat that same cycle tomorrow. And eventually, you realize that you're no longer building a life, you're just maintaining one. This cycle, it hits the working class men especially hard. And the reason matters because it's not what most people assume it is. Most working class men, they don't have a work ethic problem. If anything, they have the opposite problem. These are men who spend their entire life doing difficult things that they don't always feel like doing. They wake up and they're already exhausted. They work physically and mentally draining jobs. They push through overtime, stress, frustration, and responsibility because that's what life is required from them. If discipline were the issue, these men, they would have solved that problem years ago. The problem, it isn't effort. The real problem is where all their energy is going. Think about a Saturday that you've probably lived 100 different times. You wake up and you're motivated because today is the day that you finally get to the garage, or your budget, or your health, or that project that you've been avoiding for the last couple months. You drink your coffee and you start mentally planning your day, and you really mean it, but then real life hits. You need to cut the grass because you've had a busy week. One of your kids needs something. Your dog just threw up and something broke in the house, and now you need to run errands. And suddenly, it's noon, and then 2 o'clock, then 4 o'clock. So you tell yourself that you'll start after dinner. Then dinner comes, and after carrying responsibility all day, your brain is finally depleted. That's the part that most people underestimate. Exhaustion, it doesn't just affect your body, it affects your decision making. It affects your follow through. It also affects your capability to do the hard things after using all your energy just to survive the day. Researchers call part of this decision fatigue, but it goes much deeper than just making decisions. Every stressful moment and every problem you solve throughout your day draws down your mental and emotional reserve. So by evening, your brain is no longer asking what will help your future. It's asking what costs the least amount of energy. And relief almost always wins, but it's not because you're weak. It's because your nervous system has been running on empty since this morning. So you sit down for a few minutes, and suddenly the whole night disappears. The garage, it never got touched. That workout, it never happened. And your budget, you never looked at it. And now, another day ended in the exact same way the last 100 days did. That's where the cycle starts to tighten. That's why exhaustion becomes such a dangerous accelerant in this cycle, because when you're depleted, your follow through gets much harder. That's why so many hard-working men feel frozen even though they're working hard. Now here's the good news. The same thing that created this problem is the same thing that will solve it, and that's evidence. That's what this entire battle has come down to. Your brain has been collecting evidence against you for years. Evidence that says he quits. Evidence that says he starts, but he never finishes. In the evidence, it isn't stored as thoughts that you can argue with. It's stored as feelings. That low-level dread that shows up right before you try again. That's the reason you can't motivate yourself out of this. Because the jury that's in your brain, it doesn't rule on promises. It rules on patterns. That's why every time that you say that this time is different, it eventually fails. It's not because you didn't mean it, but meaning it and proving it are two different things to your brain, because your brain has heard the speech before. What it hasn't seen is a pattern change. So the solution, it isn't bigger promises. It's smaller promises that you actually keep. So think about it this way. If you walked into a courtroom and the only evidence on the table were years of broken promises, no amount of emotional speeches will change that verdict. The only thing that can change that verdict is new evidence. Quiet, consistent, undeniable evidence that tells a different story about who you really are. Think about that one area that hurts the most to think about. The one that has the most broken promises. For most men, that usually is their health or their finances. Or think about something physical, like that garage. Something that you walk past every day and you feel it, but you can't explain what it is. Don't make that mistake of saying that this Saturday, I'm going to finish the whole thing, because that's the exact mindset that created this cycle in the first place. Because when you set this one big massive goal and then you fall short, because life does happen, you just handed your brain another piece of evidence. Instead, make just one small promise. 20 minutes every Saturday. That's it. No pressure to finish it all at once. Just 20 minutes of you showing up to that one thing that you said you were going to show up to. At first, it feels pointless. That garage, it barely looks like it changed. You won't feel any momentum yet, and that's exactly where most people quit. They're waiting on motivation to arrive to help carry them. But motivation is just a feeling, and feelings, they're unreliable. What you're actually building is trust, and trust is built quietly. One kept promise at a time, until one day, you've noticed something has shifted. You're no longer negotiating with yourself anymore. You stop needing to be in that perfect mood. You stop looking for inspiration. You just go, and that's not motivation. That's what it feels like when your brain finally believes your word again. Now life is still going to happen. You're going to have hard weeks. You're going to be tired. Your job will still be stressful at times. So stop defining consistency as never missing. That definition destroys people. So instead, learn to renegotiate without never abandoning yourself. If 20 minutes feels impossible one week, make it 5. If 5 feels overwhelming, make it 2. Because promises still count. Evidence still counts. Because what you're teaching your brain is simple. I keep my word. Even when it's hard, even when it's small, I still keep my word. And eventually, all those small pieces, they stack up high enough that your brain starts to build a completely different case. A new case that says, maybe I am somebody that actually follows through. And that's when your life starts to really change for real. Not because motivation finally showed up, but because trust did. So let's get back to the beginning. It's 9:43 at night. You're sitting on the couch wondering where all the years went and how your life started to feel this frozen. You're wondering why it feels so difficult for you to move forward, even though deep down, you still want more for life. Maybe you now have the answer. Maybe you're not lazy. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you've just been spending years collecting evidence against yourself, and now your brain believes that story. Now imagine next Saturday, not 6 months from now, not a year from now, but next Saturday. Your house is quiet. You got your coffee in your hand. Nobody else is awake in your house yet. Your life, it hasn't changed overnight, and that garage is still unfinished. Nobody is watching. Nobody's clapping. But for 20 minutes, you work on that one thing that you said you were going to work on. And for the first time in a long time, you don't talk yourself out of it. That moment, it matters much more than it looks like from the outside. Because the garage, it isn't the first thing that's getting repaired. Your trust is. And that's actually where getting unstuck actually begins. Not when your entire life changes, but that moment that you start giving yourself evidence that it actually could.